Phenomenology, Indian Part 2. In this lesson, I take you to the other side of phenomenology, which the West least understood. The universality of the Western phenomenology stands to interrogation from the side of Indian phenomenology. Among the Eastern philosophies such as Chinese and Japanese, the Indian philosophy and phenomenology remain the largest and ever challenging theoretical anchor. Through a de-westernizing approach that as an anchor to this area of epistemology, I offer a different way of looking at Indian phenomenology. I have taken Indian cinema as a model to explain the Indian side of phenomenology, as cinema is the right visual communication media which captured the Indian national and regional phenomenology in its native and national perspective. I have used some hermeneutics generated by the like-minded philosophers from across India here to buttress my arguments. I have offered here a model that does not go too deep into the Indian philosophy to avoid complications to the learning process of Indian visual communication. To tell the learner of visual communication that Indians have a way, irrespective of regions and religious differences, to explain and understand the Indian rituals and traditions. To inform the student of visual communication that to understand symbolic actions, expressions and emotions of Indians on various occasions such as ceremonies, celebrations and festivals, average Indian does not need the theory of cognition or a deep knowledge of ontology. To enlighten the student of visual communication, a simple understanding of Indian culture, texts and literature that have come into existence centuries ago is enough than a cluster of theories, complex debates. To show to the student of visual communication how Indian cinema has the potential to capture all the facets of these visuals of phenomenology. Why to de-westernize the phenomenology? Curran and Park, Gunaratne, Thussu and Yadava have argued for a need to review the Western bias on the communication and media studies curriculum. This is because Asiatic communication traditions and culture models are quite different and independent of the dominant discourse or paradigm of Western communication traditions, whereas the early epistemological foundations for de-westernizing media research stemmed from the works of Said, Orientalism 1979 and Alatos, Alternative Discourses in Asian Social Sciences, Responses to Eurocentrism. Later research by Dissanayake, Mike, Kim, Chen and Goody have addressed the discontent with the communication theories which were Western centric and were, according to Downing, conceptually impoverishing, while Eurocentrism is dissected and critique based on theoretical frameworks of Orientalism by Said, European universality by Wallerstein and historicism by Chakrabarti. There were attempts to look into the epistemological, ontological and methodological differences between different cultural and intellectual traditions in terms of communication between East and the West. Chen advocated culture centricity either as Asian centricism or Afrocentrism as an alternative. This has led to a bifocal approach to the issue of culture centricity, culture specific versus culture general approaches to indigenization. According to Wang, the culture specific approach or the emic approach adopts the view that research should reflect foremost the social and cultural context within which it is conducted and the needs and concerns of the people involved. It suggests that theories should be derived on the basis of and also applied to specific cultures. On the other hand, Wang says that the culture general approach, also known as the ethic or universalist approach, focuses on the underlying unity of commonality across cultures. It places communication and social scientific research within its proper historical, cultural and social context, yet does not see culture specific theories as the ultimate goal as advocated by many Asian scholars such as Chu and Cheng, Chu, Dissanayake, Gunasekhara and Kuo and Wang and Shen. Gunaratne, in his recent papers in Media, Culture and Society, notes that non-Western scholars should read their classical literature afresh to document non-Western contributions to the traditions of communication arts, rhetoric, semiotics, phenomenology and critical studies, and to become active agents of change in the third wave of systems theory within the communication science tradition of cybernetics by meta-theorizing and criticizing and critiquing the axiological, epistemological and ontological dimensions of existing theories, both Western and non-Western. The term de-westernizing has however attracted skepticism throughout Indian as well as Western academia because the term media per se is deemed to be the Western in origin. Hence, de-westernization as a concept makes little sense so long as the rest of the world imports Western technology and culture. However, de-westernization does not necessarily imply contempt for the West. Wang notes that a multiculturalist perspective suggested by postmodernist and postcolonialist theories is more effective response to Eurocentrism, as it denies outright what Hall described as the legitimacy of Western standards of or criteria in classifying, comparing and ranking societies. Wang's contention could enable third world scholars to explore alternative theories, qualitative or postmodern perspective. Likewise, Mike proposes the approach to de-westernizing communication research based on qualitative traditions, deriving theoretical insights from Asian cultures, expanding the geographical focus of study, comparing and contrasting Asian cultures, pluralizing and historicizing theoretical lenses, and facing meta-theoretical and methodological questions. In my exploration of de-westernizing, I shall use the Indian film as a model and my preferred approach to qualitative and non-positivist. Further, I believe that any work on de-westernizing media research in India has to begin with ancient Indian literature, metaphysical and epistemological traditions. It must then identify relevant theoretical models to explain national, regional and local mediated situations. These in turn can be developed into pedagogical models to provide the core content for mass communication curriculum. Such a study would constitute hermeneutics of the qualitative tradition, as pointed out by Smith, Gunaratne and Wang. Evidence of communication models and theories in ancient Indian texts. Indian classical texts date back to 3000 BC with epistemological works such as Vedas. Ved means knowledge, followed by the Upanishads. Sit near the teacher and question. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata and the Gita. In addition, there are 6 prominent philosophical schools known as darshan theories. There has, however, been no systematic studies of these ancient Indian systems of knowledge by media scholars in the West, or attempts to relate them to cultural Western theories such as phenomenology, ethnomethodology, formalism, naturalism, psychoanalysis or critical theory. The Samkhya philosophy of the Indian sage Kapila has much in common with a number of Western cultural theories, including formalism, phenomenology, ethnomethodology and structuralism. Similarly, ideas of modernity and structuralism can be found in Shankara's Advaita philosophy, which offers an extensive discourse on the nature of binaries or dualities commonly found in life and literature. Shankara's philosophy contains several of the basic tenets of dialectical materialism found in Marxist literature and in the reflections of the Frankfurt School. Shankara's concepts of production, distribution and circulation contain elements of anti-capitalism and anti-hegemony, which are reflective of Marxism and critical theory that have emerged 12 centuries later to Shankara. Rajesh Kasturrangan, Nirmalya Guha and Chakravarti Ramprasad have tried to compare the Western cognition theory with Indian conceptualization and phenomenology under a grant from Fulbright funding, and published their findings around the same time in Phenomenology and Cognitive Sciences that I published this work in Asia First Week Media Educator. Contemporary communication models and theories are commonly based on the cultural discourse of European countries, France, Russia and Germany, with a colonial legacy. After the First World War, the imperialistic role of the European powers was replaced by political and cultural imperialism of the United States. Hence, cultural theory, including communication theories, emerged from dominant discourse in the West, which consequently eschewed the contributions by communication traditions and cultural systems of the East. As Hall stated, do we not implicitly acknowledge the Western superiority when we position ourselves as a developing or third world nation of the path to modernization and affected by globalization? Dassanayake writes that while Asian communication scholars have a powerful grasp of classical texts and traditions, they do not display an equal interest in the issues of knowledge, power and ideology. India's democratic, pluralistic society has long eschewed the cultural essentialism and oppressive policies which can be reduced to an individual's personal view. In fact, India's ancient philosophy was pluralistic in its pursuit of knowledge. There were extensive discussions of self, knowledge and power relationships centuries before the Frankfurt School and the postmodern theories of Michael Foucault's knowledge, self and other based on non-Marxist discourses emerged. These discussions were found in ancient Indian epics. For instance, the dialogues between Rama and Bharata in the Ramayana or between Vidura and Dhritarashtra in the Mahabharata are deeply concerned with knowledge and power relationships, which are part of a king's responsibility towards his subjects and inform the strategies he needs to employ to hold the state together and protect it from aggressors. Chanakya's Arthashastra, Sciences of Economics, as is also known as Kautilya, also includes references to the king's application of power and knowledge to expand and protect the empire and to destroy the empire of his rivals. The ancient legal text known as Manusmriti contains an extensive discourse on knowledge, power and human relations, family, religion and society, and king's discretion over these domains. This was adopted as a state law during the epic age of Ramayana and Mahabharata, although it was later condemned as puritanical, Brahminical and discriminatory to underprivileged sections of society by the rhetoric of Marxist schools of thought. Evidently, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are culture-specific texts of cultural essentialism. However, there is a wealth of culture general text, phenomenology, semiotics and psychoanalysis in both of these epics as well. Perhaps it marked the first ever beginning of the pairing of both culture-specific and culture general living traditions in India, which always has been a pluralistic social structure and tradition. It is the first ever evidence documented to support the Maha-Upanishadic statement Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the entire earth is one family unit. This statement later echoed in Panchatantra as well. This was later presented in the theory of Marshall McLuhan in his seminal work Global Village. Examples of communication models in Panchatantra, Ramayana and other classical texts. For a comparative with Western examples of magic bullet theory, also known as hypodermic needle theory, I refer to a story from Panchatantra in 300 BC. The fable relates how a Brahmin, typified as a symbol of knowledge, is deceived by 4 robbers, criminals with a talent for hoodwinking and connivance with a which typifies contemporary politicians, who in succession inform the Brahmin that he is carrying a dog rather than a goat to sell in the market. The Brahmin's suspicions arise with a second robber's statement was reinforced by the third robber. Finally, the Brahmin abandons the goat, believing it really to be a dog, when the fourth robber meets him and reiterates the assertions of the other 3. 2 examples of the same effect narrated by the Western authors. Example 1. The first kind of effect is instanced by the much cited reaction to Orson Welles' radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when simulated news bulletins reported a Martian invasion. Example 2. What Thomas is saying is that if people view a problem as being real and behave as though a problem is real, it will have real consequence even if the problem does not truly exist. Back in 1938, Orson Welles had a famous radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. The radio play was misinterpreted by some to be an actual news story, and there were many accounts at a time, people panicking and even committing suicides out of fear of the Martian invading New Jersey. We might ask whether either of these texts is easier to understand or more relevant to the Indian student of mass communication than the story of the Brahmin goat and thieves from the Panchatantra. Similarly, the dialogism between Kaikeyi and Mandhara in the Ramayana demonstrates a communication model of the type outlined by Paul Lazarsfeld, the 2-step flow and the involvement of a peer group. In brief, the story goes like this. Mandhara, Kaikeyi's close-eyed, advises Kaikeyi to claim that 3 boons that she is owed by her husband, King Dasaratha, and asks him to banish Rama, his son by another wife, to the forest and to install her own son Bharata in his place. Here we see an application of Lazarsfeld's theory of limited effects. It was Kaikeyi more than his mother's Kausalya who reared Rama. Furthermore, the author of the Ramayana narrates in the text that Kaikeyi's love for Rama was rather than that for her own son Bharata. Yet she allowed Mandhara's words, deemed here as peer influence, to confuse her understanding of power relationships and to confound her self-knowledge. Since Kaikeyi was not the biological mother of Rama, if he became Dasaratha's heir, her position would be that of a third mother. In order to get honors and royal treatment as a first mother of the heir to the throne and afford to express herself in relation to the power, she needed to establish Bharata as heir, although he was younger than Rama. By narrating the woes she might experience if Rama became the king, Mandhara incited Kaikeyi to oblige Dasaratha to grant her 3 boons. Here Kaikeyi acted against her own conscience, and will initially she was happy at Dasaratha's announcement that he would make Rama the king of Ayodhya. It was what she very much wanted, but Mandhara's peer, self-knowledge, power relationships arguments changed her mindset and persuaded her to Dasaratha make her own son king instead. Lazarsfeld said that keep in mind that the opinion leaders are ordinary people who are simply very interested and involved in a topic. The scenario of Mandhara's contention as put forward by Kaikeyi to Dasaratha and Dasaratha's subsequent advice to his son that he revolt or disregard his boons to Kaikeyi bears a resemblance to problem of situational justice that were put forward by the postmodernists in 1970s and 80s and beyond. This would support Wang's view that culture-specific situations in Asia region might require postmodernist and hermeneutics-based interpretations that defy the dominant paradigm of the West. India was a colonial country for over 4 centuries. Even before the invasion by the Mughal kings, it was hardly a union in the sense of what the British bequeathed to India at the time of partition. Before 1947, India was only a union or an Akhanda Bharat 3 times in the history: the prehistoric age of Ashoka and the reigns of Khilji and Akbar. During the Second World War, when the West and especially the United States was grappling with the problem of countering Nazi propaganda by developing theories and models for media applications and communication, India remained a colonial nation and was in no position to choose its own communication policy, nor was it in a position to develop indigenous communication curriculum theories based on its own ancient literature and wisdom. This is one reason why India's scholars who received their initial training in the media schools of the West during colonial and immediate post-colonial times chose to explain the concepts of communication to Indian students using Western models. However, it was in the West that early attempts were made to find communication models in terms of interpersonal communication and linguistics. In the ancient Indian literature, Ferdinand de Saussure and Noam Chomsky were among the earliest scholars to use Panini's Sanskrit grammar Ashtadhyayi, commentary on the grammar of Vedic texts, to describe transformative English grammar. In the late 19th century, Vivekananda explained the perception and the cognition using the tenets of Sankhya philosophy, which describes human psychology in terms of sensory impulses and stimuli. Later in 1912, a group of German psychologists led by Max Wertheimer put toward a theory of perception popularly known as Gestalt psychology, which has elements in common with Samkhya philosophy. Dissanayake, who analyzed approaches to languages and communication in the Vakyapadiya, observed that Aloki uses semiotic analysis to understand the Paritta ritual of Buddhism. Dissanayake went to explore the works of Nagarjuna, a Buddhist monk whose ideas he found to bear a significant resemblance to the recent formulations of postmodern thinkers. Similar works done by Bapat to explore the semiotics of Yakshagana, a dance ballad from folk tradition of Karnataka. Indian cinema as a model for the indigenization of media studies. In this paper, I am attempting to formulate some underlying principles for developing indigenous mass communication content for the benefit of Indian students, drawing on the ontological and structural developments of Indian cinema, which presents an ideal model for comprehending how both culture general and how culture specific media content are generated. It can also be used to explain local, regional and national paradigms of communication complexities. Indian films can best be understood in terms of Indian culture and philosophical traditions, which also make it easier to trace some of the Indian philosophical equivalents to the Western communication theories. Situating film studies centrally in this de-westernizing project, Wang writes, in film and area studies and to a large extent in cultural studies, indigenization is considered a concern that after some 20 years of debate on cross-cultural reading has been worked through. That film can be a subject of philosophical inquiry is widely accepted. In fact, film is culture. In order to understand this culture, one needs to be familiar with native cultures such as its language, arts and tradition, and its ontological and philosophical developments, both national and regional, in the case of pluralistic societies like India. Yao and Kaplan explored whether modern and postmodern theories such as psychoanalysis, feminism and the theories of Frankfurt School can be used to interpret films of non-Western origin. After examining the Yellow Earth, a fifth generation film, Yao suggested that a system of indigenous philosophy, Daoism, could be used to avoid the pitfalls of the Western theory, which is premised on treating the Western cultures as objects and the Western cultures as subjects. Although all the Western theoretical systems, phenomenology, formalism, realism, modernism, structuralism, postmodernism, psychoanalysis, feminism and semiotics that film scholars apply to film analysis can be applied to Indian cinema. These all have equivalents in Indian philosophical systems. The Indian cinema has its own distinct narrative and genres, and it is a major world cinema on par with Hollywood in terms of size and investment. In fact, Telugu and Hindi cinema constitute two major film industries, each with its own genres. The Telugu industry produces more diverse and mixed genres than the Hindi film industry. Commencing with the silent era, India had distinction of producing award-winning films such as Do Biga Zameen, Shankarabharanam and Swatimutyam, both directed by K. Viswanath, which had philosophical theoretical inputs as explained by Wartenberg, whereas Do Biga Zameen offered the post-critical theorist the much needed space to situate the film in the Marxist dialectics, diegesis. The modernists have attempted to explain it from the traditional philosophical perspective that Janni Janmabhumischa Swargadapi Gariyasi, which means the mother and the motherland are always higher than the heaven. In the context of the film, the 2 hectares of land for the farmer is a metaphor for the mother, and a farmer cannot imagine alienation of his self from the land, which offered him the identity, power and social status. Similarly, the 2 films of Vishwanath offered the direction for social reform to eliminate social barriers such as economic and caste based differences. Besides stigmatic traditions of questionable widow remarriages with a mentally dyslexic man through an implication of line such as the dance and music combination of modernity with postmodern perspectives. Indian cinema had played a multifaceted role in India's overall cultural development in the last 100 years. Indian films have dealt with a wide range of themes and social complexities in various genres. Taking account of linguistic and regional diversity, cinema has catered successfully to local as well as national needs. Indian cinema has a unique ability to combine the spatial arts of painting, sculpture and architecture with the temporal arts of poetry, dance and music. Gokul Singhe and Dissanayake have suggested that Indian cinema, its structure on the model of the Ramayana, and offer the audience a melodrama subsumed in nationalist and regional values of tradition and culture. In other words, one can recollect the history and heritage of ancient India and successive transformations of Indian culture and civilization using the 100-year history of Indian cinema from the silent era of the films of the present day. Furthermore, Indian cinema offers room for rhetoric of the sort found in ancient Indian epic, Rama's rhetoric in the Ramayana or Sanjay and Vidura's rhetoric in the Mahabharata. Semiotics, which is part of Indian Vedic culture, also plays an important role. The Vedas comprise 2 parts, Karmakanda concerned with rituals and Jnanakanda concerned with wisdom. Both constitute a narrative rich in allusion, euphemisms and metaphors containing embedded codes, signs and conventions, all of which constitute the core of semiology of the West. The Jnanakanda offered more space for interpretation and contains parallels with the ritual model, of which Maxwell writes, ritual plays a part in unifying and in mobilizing sentiment and action. Examples of the model can be found in the spheres of religion and public ceremonies and festivals. James Carey defined ritual communication as linked to such terms as sharing, participation, association, fellowship and the possession of common faith. The Darshan, Shastras and the Gita also provide examples of allusion, semiotics and rhetoric. These scriptures can with no difficulty be linked from their ultimate aim of offering moksha, liberation, for their purpose of comparing them with the materialistic interpretation of the Western cultural theories. Indian cinema has 2 primary characteristics. First, it reflects the genesis and development of cinema in the West, and second, it mirrors the order of the Indian history and social growth from the mythology of the prehistoric period to the medieval folk tales and modern social history. Both these characteristics offer the needed leverage for Indian cinema to be considered as an ideal medium of mass communication for representing both universal as well as specific culture. In this lesson, I offered counter evidence to the Western phenomenology. Indian phenomenology and semiotics is the largest branch of philosophical domain among the Eastern philosophies. Offering Indian cinema as a model, I have offered how the visuals of Indian cinema are constructed around Indian traditions, cultures, ceremonies and celebrations. I have also offered evidence here how these visuals have captured these activities of ordinary Indian life and how easily these are understood by average film goers of Indian cinema without struggling to know how cognition theory of the West makes it possible. Indians have their own cognition protocols that need not struggle from any lack of theoretical anchoring.